Former OMB acting director under President Trump and Center for American Restoration, President Russ Vought, joins us now. And joining the conversation all morning long, Gianna Caldwell and Nancy Tangler. Russ, I want to start with you and talk about funding the construction wall, because the money has been earmarked and the administration is saying we're not going to use it to continue with the wall at the same time that it's facing a migrant crisis right now.
Yeah, this is a problem, and it's one of the things that, unfortunately, we've seen from this administration is they have an ideological aversion to being able to fund construction of the wall. This is money that Congress provided. It should be used for that particular spending approach, and it's something that should be completed. And unfortunately, we haven't seen it, and we have a crisis on our border because the policies that President Trump put into place, they have overridden.
Well, it's interesting because the administration is pointing the finger back at the previous administration, saying it basically, with its policies, created this mess when actually the Trump administration tried to create some order, tried to work with the rules, and tried to and make sure that immigration was working through the process that it was supposed to. Yet you've got a situation right now where the system is totally overrun, and the president is saying don't come after he sort of set forth these actions of making it much easier.
It's a ludicrous accusation. Why didn't we have a problem the last year before this president took office? We have rookies in charge right now because they took something that was very delicate. Because we have certain laws on the books that act like magnets for illegal immigrants to come across our border. Because of those magnets, we had to have very delicate policies that were put in place to be able to get the border secure. This administration got rid of all of those policies, remain in Mexico, some of the asylum reforms, the border construction, and now they have a crisis on their hands and they don't want to do anything about it. And what's worse, Democrats are considering amnesty bills in the House of Representatives this week, making it even bigger neon light to say come across our border.
And then not only are they not taking any action at the moment, they also are denying the fact that it's a crisis. They won't call it a crisis, but many people are. I want to take our attention to Texas for a moment because Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell telling reporters yesterday about his worries over the next infrastructure bill.
I think the Trojan horse will be called infrastructure, but inside the Trojan horse will be all the tax increases that Senator Scott and others have been talking about. They want to raise taxes across the board. And the only way I think they could pull that off would be through a reconciliation process. They have one more of those available to them. And my suspicion is they will try to jam everything they can into that bill and call it an infrastructure bill.
Russ, Trojan horses and reconciliation, that seems to be the theme here, and that seems to be how to pass legislation that the other side doesn't agree with. It doesn't sound very bipartisan to me.
It's not. This infrastructure bill is going to be infrastructure in name only. I'm even hearing that they're talking about social infrastructure, whatever that means, in terms of child care programs. They're talking climate programs. They're talking green energy subsidies, even Medicare for all they're trying to put on this. Thankfully, there's some rules that govern how reconciliation is supposed to be used. But this is going to be a disaster, and unfortunately, they're not moving in a bipartisan manner, and hopefully it implodes in the United States Senate.
Let's talk about big tech as well, because a new survey from Protocol shows that 77% of tech employees say that companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google, they have gotten too powerful. They do have too much influence. Your reaction to that, do you agree? And do you think this administration is going to prioritize this?
Well, thankfully, big tech workers have consciences, and they know that they're working in an industry that is misusing their power right now. It's concentrated market power, and it's a problem. There have been some signs that the administration are thinking about moving in nominating individuals that are willing to use antitrust laws that are on the books. We don't know that yet, but there are tools that we have in the toolbox to be able to go after and make sure that big tech is not bullying other companies around and using their powers to silence conservatives across this country.
Nancy?
Yeah, thank you. Russ, I just learned that Senators Schatz and Thune are introducing a bipartisan bill to attack the liability shield that these companies enjoy. Could you comment on that and what you think the odds are that this gets some traction in Congress?
Well, I think I'm glad there's a bipartisan commitment and momentum behind reforming Section 230, which, as you mentioned, is the liability shield, to be able to make sure that companies are using that shield, which is a benefit from the government to give them, to be able to say, are you using this in a good faith effort, and are you not using this in terms of anything objectionable? That's how the law is written right now, to be able to silence other voices across the country. My concern, Nancy, is that the other side also wants to make sure that this is used more. And so I think we're going to have to see how the details of that particular approach look on paper, but I'm glad that there's momentum in this area.
Russ, I just want to finish with a final question on, that refers back to what Mitch McConnell was talking about. I think an example of the Trojan horse that he's referencing specifically is the $1.9 trillion in coronavirus, relief. That's what it was called when it was going through, and it's now been renamed American Rescue Plan. It's just so blatantly obvious to me that so much in there didn't have to do with coronavirus. That's how they sold it, and now in hindsight, they're calling it something else. I mean, the American people, many of them, are not happy about sort of being misled and misrepresented.
They're not, and they know that $2 trillion bill had 9% for COVID, funneled money to big state bailouts in terms of states that had mismanaged their economies and their states for decades. It was a disaster. It was wasteful. Across the bipartisan spectrum, people said that. And we're just seeing more of the same. And unfortunately, at some point, it's going to catch up to them.
Russ Vought, great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your time.